Hello, my name is Nancy Pascal, and I'm the Executive Director here at Halter. Prior to being here as an Executive Director, I also did the same thing in another organization, and in an earlier chapter of my life, I was a therapist. I focused mostly on individuals who had experienced trauma, and because of that, they may also have developed a substance abuse problem or problems with their relationships. One of the things that we know is that a huge percentage of individuals have experienced trauma. We also know that it is critical for organizations to become trauma informed. We're going to talk about that and your role in helping Halter to become trauma informed as we go through this presentation. I encourage you, if you have questions, seek me out, ask Bethany to set up a meeting with me, and let's go over your questions. I do have to say that some of the information we share may bring some things up. It may be disturbing. If you need to put this on pause and take a break, do so. We do appreciate everything that you bring here to Halter. You are part of what makes Halter a healing and learning environment. So as we move forward, we're going to talk about what trauma is, why we should be trauma informed, and how we become trauma informed. And the key to those things often is you. You, our volunteers, are the largest percentage of the people who are here at Halter. Because it takes an average of 3 volunteers for every child who rides, every child who participates, there are more of you than there are of our staff and our participants. So for us to be trauma informed depends on you. So trauma is different from post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. Sometimes it's now being called PTS, post-traumatic stress. Trauma results from an individual or a series of events or an individual event or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening. And it can have lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning, mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. The difference between post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and trauma is that it is normal to have a trauma response immediately following an experience. Flashbacks, nightmares, intrusive thoughts. These are just a few of the examples. We know that everybody in the United States at this point has probably been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. We haven't even begun to figure out the long-term impacts of the trauma, not the disease, but the trauma of either experiencing COVID firsthand with a loved one, having to confront it on a daily basis in the workplace. However you have had to handle trauma in terms of COVID-19, we haven't begun to delve into. So we really aren't at the post part of PTS for the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we do know that prior to the pandemic, 70% of the adults in the U.S. say that they have experienced some type of a traumatic event at least once in their lives. That's 223.4 million people. More than 2/3 of children report at least one traumatic event by the age of 16. And many have been exposed to or experienced what we call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. We're going to talk more about ACEs here in a bit. But PTSD occurs when a normal trauma response becomes chronic. Why should Halter become trauma informed? Why should you become trauma informed? There's an increased focus on the impact of trauma and how service systems can help to resolve or worsen those trauma-related issues. Halter is part of the community service system, and as such, we want to make sure that what we do in the way we handle information, in the way we treat people, are trauma-informed. If you look to the graphic on the right, what you'll see is that for every child, they're really part of multiple systems. They are part of a family, a classroom, a peer group, religious settings. They're also part of larger systems, school systems, medical systems, educational systems, and in the community. And surrounding that, you have economic patterns, political philosophies, all kinds of other things. All of those things work together to either make our lives better or worse. When organizations are not trauma-informed, we actually make things worse. Let me give you an example. When someone calls about possible services for their child, sometimes it takes some courage. Many parents, especially of very young children, have a hard time. When they begin to talk about their children, they typically talk about their deficits, what it is they can't do, not what they can do. And calling a stranger and saying, my child doesn't speak, or he's 4 and not potty trained, or he throws temper tantrums, or she hits, or she isn't able to run and play. That can be very traumatic for a parent, because most parents don't know when their children are born that their children may be special. So they're dealing with their own emotions and then having to talk to a stranger. So if I'm the one who answers the phone and they start talking about their child, I usually stop them and I say, it's not that I don't care. I want to be respectful, that you don't need to tell your story over and over. The person who needs to hear from you is our program coordinator, Sarah Newman, so that she can figure out whether we are an appropriate resource for you, your child, your family. That's a really basic way that we can become trauma-informed, and our systems can better help those who seek our services, or we can refer them to someone who's in a better position to do that. These are the issues that we must do in order to be trauma-informed. First, we have to increase the safety. Well, Halter's a pretty safe place. For those of you who don't know, we follow a set of international standards provided by the Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship International. And everyone who is providing services in the arena for therapeutic riding or equine assisted learning, in the arena, on the trail, all have a certification from PATH. For our hospital programs, all of our therapists have been through at least a level 1, what they call hippotherapy training, specifically working with horses to help people. We give people a sense of increased control, and they actually do have control. They don't have to tell their story to everyone. We seek to understand. We increase our empathy. I've spent a lot of time since I came to Halter talking to parents and grandparents, listening to them, not sympathizing, but empathizing with the many hoops they have to jump through to get services for their children, with how tired they are, how hard it is for them to get a break, because it's hard to find a babysitter for a child with special needs. We're a safe place, not just physically, but emotionally. And recovery begins in a safe place. We decrease our risk of secondary trauma. We don't ask people to tell their story twice. We're conscientious of how we interact. And we don't do things that are likely to cause more trauma. Let me back up a minute. Secondary trauma really is for you, for us as staff members, for the therapists. It's us taking on someone else's trauma. We have to be able to leave people's pain and sorrow at the gate when we leave, or we won't have enough capacity to come back tomorrow. It doesn't mean we leave our empathy, but it does mean that we have good, healthy ways of coping. So we're going to talk about ACEs for a moment. As I said, ACEs are adverse childhood experiences that harm a child's developing brain and lead to changes in how they respond to stress. They also have been known, and the documentation is there, it damages their immune system so profoundly that the effects show up decades later. ACEs is the underlying cause of much of our burden of chronic disease, most mental illness, and is at the root of most violence. So you have several types of ACEs. You have direct abuse, physical, emotional, and sexual. There's a reason that we don't have you go off one-on-one with a child, for your protection, but also because it may make someone feel uncomfortable. Neglect. We tend to think about things like not enough food, not warm enough, no clothing. But there's also emotional neglect. Not getting the response, not getting empathy when you need it, especially as a child. And then you have household dysfunction. Family members with mental illness, a family member who's incarcerated. The mother is threatened or treated violently. There's substance abuse and divorce. Well, at the end of a divorce, it may be healthier because the situations in the home prior to divorce may be worse. But during that time frame can also be tremendously traumatic for children. So what we know, and this comes from the World Health Organization, is that from birth to death, if you had adverse childhood experiences, it impairs the social, emotional, and cognitive functioning. It's easier, more likely to adopt risky behaviors, smoking, drinking, drug use, promiscuity. And those things can then lead to disease, disability, and social problems. All of those combined actually shorten the lifespan. The original study on ACEs was done by an insurance company several decades ago, and the data is absolutely solid. We still see research showing the evidence of this today. However, there's hope. Trauma-informed people and organizations help by doing several things. The first is they're aware. Everyone considers the possibility, maybe even the probability, that people that are involved have been traumatized. We build healthy relationships. And that includes healthy boundaries. That means you're not meeting with the participants away from Halter. That's an emotional boundary. If they ask you, can you come to my birthday party? There are ways to set a clear boundary and not be hurtful. Setting and maintaining healthy boundaries helps you and others. Reflective listening. Repeating someone's words exactly back to them and not paraphrasing. Using congruent body language. If you are standing there with your arms crossed in front of you, that puts up a barrier and says, I don't really want you to be close, regardless of the words that are coming out of your mouth. Training. I cannot overemphasize training and practicing the skills that you learn. This is not really about the Ohio Person-Centered Care Coalition, but I really like the graphic. Our process here does not re-traumatize people. These are the key components of what they call TIC, trauma-informed care. And you can see that we are working on all of these things. Incorporating the approach of trauma-informed care in every aspect of the organization and a genuine culture of trauma-informed care is crucial. And recognizing the pervasiveness of trauma is also crucial. One of the things we can do is change our thinking from what is wrong with this individual to what happened to this individual. So that we've often heard, many of us, of the power and control wheel. This is the respect wheel. This is the healthy relationship. And take a look at this, spend some time. These are the elements that are essential for healthy relationships. Trust, safety, honesty, support, cooperation, and accountability. Halter seeks to be a person-centered service. We want folks to have as much choice and input as possible. For example, we ask individuals what their goals are, or if they're not able to provide information, asking their parents. We look to promote trust and safety, but not without taking some risks. Otherwise, what we do is a pony ride. People need to learn to trust themselves and what they can do. These are our values. So we can build resilience, which is a way to decrease the impact of trauma. You do that as a volunteer by having a purpose, by developing confidence, building good relationships with other volunteers, with the Halter staff, and adaptability. One of the things that we really teach here at Halter is adaptability. Part of that is learning to ride a new horse, changing tack, following directions. These are all components of resilience, and all of them are elements of what we do here at Halter. These are the other ways. When children are learning to steer, we give them a goal. They have to figure out how to get from one side of the arena to the other. You're hearing us work on helping our children to recognize their emotions and those of others. And we're very actively working on social skills. We are helping our children to develop self-control. That is one of the biggest ways to build resilience. So, when you are trauma-informed, you will be perceived as a safe person. You have to keep and maintain your boundaries. As much as you may feel like, I can help this child, people will come to you often unexpectedly and tell their stories. Listen without judgment. Do not promise to keep secrets about current danger, such as abuse or potential self-harm. Debrief with the appropriate staff member. Ideally, that's going to be the instructor, but if you hear something, do not leave without making sure you have collared one of us and let us know your concern. We will not drop the ball. We will connect with the family and we will help make any referrals. Make sure if you hear a tough story that you detox and take care of yourself. What can you do? Be aware. Increase your awareness and that of others. Understand trauma physiology. When someone perceives a threat or danger, the brain downregulates and logic, planning, and social behavior are compromised. We are going to continue our discussion of the impact of trauma. So here you can keep learning. Build trusting relationships. Practice and teach self-regulation, both for yourself and to manage your own reactions, but also as a skill to help others. Practice self-care. Take care of yourself so you can show up and offer your best, most present self to those you work with. Keep learning and keep practicing. So we learned how trauma differs from post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic stress disorder. We learned about ACEs and about resilience. You learned why Halter is becoming trauma-informed and what that really means. You learned what you can do and just how important you are. And you learned about the importance of self-care. This is my cell phone. On the bottom, it is also my office phone. So during office hours, that's probably the better one. That is my personal email. So you probably ought to use my Halter email, which is nancy@haltersc.com. Don't walk away if you have a concern. If we can help you, we will. Thank you for helping us enhance the lives of children with challenges through learning, through healing, through equine relationships. The end.